welcome everybody. This is Wargamer Sean coming at you. I am making this video for Goretog or Goretag. I apologize if I got your name wrong. You had requested talking about Tyranids and Tyranid tactics. I actually decided to make. I'm gonna try to actually go through the codex and all of the supplements and also the Anphelion project, the Imperial Armour book, at some point just kind of break down by category, go through HQs and elites and stuff like that, and go through like I do with my other codices, just because I think the NIDs have gotten so much more recently that I think it would be a good one to do. So, but I'm going to make this video for you to kind of talk about your kind of specific question, and then we'll kind of do a bigger thing because it would just be too long of a video to cover everything. You had asked, you know, what would you do for Tyranids to kind of help be competitive against a very shooty army, and it depends on your. I think that question depends on your local meta, and also depends on what your group plays, or if you, and also it kind of depends on, do you do tournaments or do you just play kind of beer pretzel type of games with your buddies. Then you have more freedom, I think, than if you're playing trying to build a more competitive list or play more competitively. So I'm gonna kind of go through things, and we'll start with kind of ultra competitive and kind of trickle our way down, I guess. You know, I think the start of any Tyranid force is potentially to I hate to say it because I think so many people do it, but I think if you're trying to play competitive, I think the key to it is to fit as many flyrants in as you can. Now, that's not necessarily true, but I think for the most part it is, just because it's the best thing that we have for Tyranids for shooting, because their ballistic skill, they went up to their ballistic skill 4 now instead of ballistic skill 3, so they're hitting on 3s, which is amazing. And they've got, if you put double devourers, which I'm assuming you're putting the 2 twin link devourers on, you've got 12 shots that are twin linked, which are strength 6, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's going to help you take out light vehicles. It's going to be harder on bigger things, but you still can take down Imperial Knights if you get, you know, if you fly to certain, you know, sections that you can hurt them on. Now, the key to kind of using these guys, they only have 4 wounds, and if they get knocked out of the sky, they're going to die. They have no invulnerable save. You're hoping for catalysts, but, you know, unfortunately it's a number 1 on the die roll for psychic powers, and you're only going to get so many of them off in 7th edition, so you can't rely on it. And there's been games where I haven't gotten catalyst on, you know, depending on how many, you know, flyrants you're taking, you might not get it. So you can't rely on it. Dominion you're obviously going to get, because you get your Primaris for free, and that's the only power group that they can take from. If you're playing a heavy Maelstrom game, you know, it may not be the way to go, just because anything that's flying can't take objectives, can't take Maelstrom points, or, you know, some of the Maelstrom is, you know, you've got to get, you're within 12 inches of the opponent's board edge. Well, it doesn't count if you're not on the ground, and quite frankly, if you have a flyer on the ground, they're probably going to die, unless they're really well hidden. So, I think it depends on your meta and what you're playing. Now, you know, our group does play some Maelstrom, and also, you know, I know going to Adepticon, they are going to play some Maelstrom, so they are going to be important, but I think you can still do it and still be competitive. Now, you can take flyrants, maybe at least 2 in your list, potentially 3, depending on if you use High Fleet Leviathans, you know, force organization chart. There's just so much out there for NIDs right now, which is a little confusing, unfortunately. What else do you do for your list? Well, it depends on the way you want to play. If you want to play really ultra competitive, you may take a minimum amount of troops, and so you may take some of these little mucoid spore clusters that are very popular right now. They're 15 points, And so you can max out your troops, especially in Leviathan, where you can take 9 of them. You can take 9 mucoid spore clusters, just one each, 15 points, and then just put all your rest of your points into things that kill things. Now, flyrants are one. Some people, if they want to go heavy flyer, will go basically hive crones or harpies now. You know, hive crones in last edition were good because the they had a really strong vector strike, which is strength 8. The problem is now is that vector strike on the ground only gets you 1 hit, and so the hive crones aren't as good as they used to be from last edition. Now this edition, harpies are better because they've got, if you take the strength 9 cannon, they're twin linked and they're potentially taking out bigger things like your super heavies or your you know, Imperial Knight Titans. So I think the Strength 9 gun's the way to go. You can go with the Strength 6 gun, which is large blast, and to help you kill like infantry. But honestly, you've got other things that can kill infantry. And quite honestly, too, it depends on what your local meta is. But if you're, I know you were talking about like a shooty army. So if you're talking about Tau or talking about Eldar, which are going to be tanked up probably, that Strength 6 may not do you a lot of good until you get the goods out. And by the time you get the goods out, if you get like your 5 Dire Avengers out, you've got things that can deal with 5 Dire Avengers. You don't need that thing to take them out. And yes, it's true, you could face orc hordes, but if we're talking about competitive here, you're not going to face a ton of orcs, unfortunately. I love orcs too, but they're not top tier right now. You know, your Space Marines, your Eldar, or your Tau are probably your top tier. And so if you're kind of, it's hard now in this 7th edition, which I kind of like. You always want to try to build an all-comers list, but the problem is that there's so many ways to build things now, especially with super heavies in the mix of Imperial Knights, that it's hard to build an all-comers list. So mainly you're kind of going to, well, okay, what am I most likely going to see? What's the most popular thing out there right now? It's not NIDS right now. And so I'm going to build to kill that. And if you're building to kill shooty armies, now probably most of the time, I still think Tau is very, very strong, and it's very good. I've seen people that play it very well. They're not as popular as Eldar and Space Marines are right now, and I think Tau are a little trickier to play sometimes. So I think you're more likely to see Eldar Space Marines. So if you're going to gear towards them, you want to build towards things that can take out tanks and things that can take out high strength, low AP things. Now we don't have a lot of things that eat through AP, so mostly we have to kind of DACA things. I mean, we have the Exocrine, but I don't think that's, you know, super competitive. And depending on how you want to build it, you know, I don't think you're going to see it that much. Now, what are other things besides flyrants and potentially mucoid spore clusters? You know, I like Frontline Gaming. There's a guy that plays NIDS a lot. I like his idea. You know, your flyrants are going to be flying and doing things, and you don't want to give up Slay the Warlord. And if you remember now, which some people don't know, and I didn't know this until I actually kind of chatted with him a little bit, because I'm like, hey, he made his Warlord, he took a Gene Stealer and took a Broodlord, and he's like, hey, I made that my Warlord. I'm like, how can you make your Warlord that? But in 7th edition, on page, I think it's 124 or 125 of the big rulebook, it says you can make any character in your army a Warlord. And so he makes the Broodlord a Warlord, and so he kind of hides him and tries to keep him alive, and basically sends out the flyrants to do whatever. And it's kind of a smart move. And the cool thing is, you know, everybody poo-poos Gene Stealers, and they are easy to kill. But I played a tournament once where I actually took two. You could take 2 Force Organizational Charges, and I took 2 Lords of War. I took a Barbed Hierodil and a Scythe Hierodil, and I took 2 Flyrants, and I took a bunch of Gene Stealers and 1 unit of Tyranid Warriors, and that was my list. And the Gene Stealers helped a lot because, one, they could infiltrate, and they could go capture objectives, and they didn't have to worry about synapse. And so I don't think Gene Stealers are that terrible. Now, super competitive builds, you're probably going to see the mucoid spores because they're really cheap, and so they're easy to use for troops. But and I think a 1 unit Gene Stealers and potentially a Broodlord is something to think about if you wanted to kind of hide your Warlord. As far as the rest of your build, I do think that the Tyrannocyte is a good monstrous creature. Excellent, actually better than the pods that we used to have, because it actually can keep moving around. It's not just stuck in one place once it lands, and it has a lot of DACA that it can shoot. So it's 75 points. It's a little, it's like, oh, initially you're like, gosh, that's so expensive. But for what it does, it's actually very good. And it can take objectives too. It's not objective secured, it's not OBSEC, but if there's nothing around, it can still take objectives. I think, honestly, besides the Flyrants, my suggestion to you is to take a Tyrannocyte and potentially put something in it. Well, obviously you're going to put something in it. Put something in it, though, that can get to the back lines. Now, some people, there's these new creatures out there. This guy, this Toxicrene, I mean, I bought a model. I didn't actually buy two because I don't think that the Maliceptor, he's cool looking, but I just don't think he's that good. The thing that I'm not liking with what GW is doing with the monstrous creatures is they're making their armor save 4+, and it's only half the time. That means half the time you're going to fail. So it's so easy to kill them. Now, I know the Toxicrene has Shrouded, so you can stick him in cover and help with that. I just think there's so much that ignores cover, that it can potentially ignore cover in this game, especially with the armies that are out there that are top tier. So your the Eldar, especially with the Wave Serpents, and the Tau, so much ignores cover, I wouldn't rely on it. And that's the hard thing about having a wall coming forward and relying on, basically cover from, different things that give out cover. There's a couple of units that do right now. Actually, if I were going to use the Toxicrene, honestly, what I would stick in it is I would, some people, it depends. I mean, you could use, there's a new, they redid the Zoanthrope Brood, and you can have a Neurothrope, which isn't bad, and it could really come down and pop something out. Potentially, if you do the Math Hammer, a unit of 6 is probably not going to take down a Night Titan, just because the shot of it is, let's see, I think it's only AP 1. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I gotta look at the power quick. I apologize. It's AP2. Sorry, AP2. And so you need a 5 or a 6 just to try to blow it up, which means you get D3 hull points. So, all likelihood, it's not too likely you're going to take out Night Titan. Now, with other things, you certainly could. But I think it's something to think about. A Zoanthrope Brood potentially is something you could throw in there. Now, what I really like is one of a couple things. The one that I like the most, I really like the Tyrannofex. The reason why is he's a 2+ save, which is nice. And I'd just leave him with the Acid Spray. You could leave him with the Singer Salvo, although sometimes I like to take Electroshock Grubs, because it's strength 4, AP 5, but it also is Haywire, which is really nice. And I like to put that on my Flyrants too. But I think if you're going to drop down those pods, I think those are excellent things to drop down because they're probably going to survive. You can put their foot in cover to give them a cover save in case you need an invuln, but a 2-up is not easy to ignore compared to a 4-up is easy to ignore and a 3-up is easy to ignore. The other thing you could put in there is something from Imperial Armour or Forge World, which is a Demachiron, which I really like too, and he's got a lot of special. He's got a 3-up save, which at least gives him a little bit more survivability, but he's going to be such a target, people are going to shoot at him and try to kill him, because everybody is already very scared of these guys. But I think he's good. The other thing that you could put in there is you could put troops choices, and you could put, like 20 of your Gaunts in there with Devours. It gets a little expensive, but you'd have a ton of shots when they first come down, and they'd be, objective secured. Now, they wouldn't be Synapse, so you'd need to have your Flyrant out there to help protect it. The other thing is you could put a squad of warriors in there, although which will provide synapse, but unfortunately I think they're going to die pretty easily. The other way to run Flyrants is to have take 3 Molix as your heavy support choices, because they're very cheap and they come up and do 2 strength 6 AP2 large blast hits. Now, if you're like me, some people in my group are very good at, when they roll the scatter dice, hitting. I, for some reason, don't seem to be able to hit for crap. And so my Molix tend to be not that impressive for me, because they tend to go off target and not do what I want them to do, or come up and then just like not do anything and then get shot to death. But I think they're very good. I see a lot of people running them competitively. So that's a possibility. The other thing that you can do to kind of put in the in the transports, you could put an Exocrine. I just think he's going to die too easily, just because I think they're too easy to kill. They're good AP and they're nice. Really one of our few low AP models, and he's 170 points, so he's 5 points less than the Tyranifex, but he's got 1 less wound and he's got a 3-up save. It's up to you. The other, you could potentially put a DAC effects into one of them, but you can only fit 1 monstrous creature in these transports, and I think the Carnifex is going to die very quickly. Now, the other thing you can do if you're running a list is you can have kind of a wall going at them too, and so you're pressing with them when they know the pods are coming in, and you're pressing the Flyrants at them. Maybe you have a Molix coming up too, so they know there's things coming in their backfield, and you have a little bit of a wall going towards them. Now that you could have a Tyranid Prime buried in there. If I was going to put a Tyranid Prime, I'd probably put them with a Venom Thrope instead. One, to give cover if it's going to help, because you need that wall just to stay alive. The Venom Thrope, honestly, their toughness 4, their 2 wounds, they're too easy to take out. I see people running them, but they're too easy to kill in my opinion. I love Venom Thropes. I love what they've become, because they're now elites, they're not HQs anymore. They got cheaper. They're not monstrous creatures anymore, which means that your Tyranid Prime can join them, because in 6th to 7th edition, you can't join monstrous creatures anymore. But they're not monstrous creatures anymore. They're poison 2-up, and they give preferred enemy to anybody within 6 inches of them when they kill something. So they're good, and they're even good in close combat. They're not powerful against armor or dreadnoughts anymore, because they're not monstrous creatures. They can't smash, but they're still decent, and they can survive a lot longer than the Venom Thrope. And you could take a unit of 1 or 3 and keep that group alive, have gaunts in front of them, kind of as a meat shield, and have other guys coming up with them. Now, if I was going to run the line, I'd have a scoring unit, and you could have things like your Hive Guard or something like that going with them that can shoot and get protection. The problem is that the line doesn't always stay alive anymore, since there's so much stuff that ignores cover. So I think competitively, if you're usually going with things that can move and operate on their own, which means you kind of need synapse, or you don't need to rely on synapse, which is things like gene stealers. So I've kind of been all over the board here, but I think kind of to sum things up, and once again, this is my opinion, but if you're playing competitively, I think a good HQ choice is always going to be your flying Hive Tyrants, your Flyrants. You may have a Tyranid Prime that you have stuck somewhere to have him as your Warlord to kind of try to keep him alive and not worry about the Flyrants. But honestly, bang for your points and buck, it's probably going to be the Flyrant, and you're probably going to go with 2 to 3 Flyrants, depending on the list you're doing or depending on what's allowed. And a lot of times with the Flyrants, you're going to have double Devourers and you're going to have the Electroshock Grubs, because if you need to, you can always use that as a guaranteed glance on a super heavy or a vehicle. So I think if you have the points, Electroshock Grubs are always worth it. Out of all of the little bio weapons, I like the Electroshock Grubs the most. I know some people like the flesh grubs, which is like a flesh bane, so it's like 2-up poison. It's nice, but if you're not going to do anything against a vehicle, which that's what I like about the Electroshock Grubs, and I still think it's powerful enough to take on most creatures because it's Strength 4, AP 5. As far as your troops choices, I think you're going to either go with the Muculid Spore, pods, because they're very cheap, and they were a great addition, or you may, I know it sounds silly, but you may really consider using some Gene Stealers to potentially put a Broodlord in to have your Warlord so you keep them safe, or potentially just to have kind of cheap 5-man units to go and grab objectives and infiltrate, because if you're playing objective games or if you're playing Maelstrom games, you're going to have a really hard time with a lot of flying things because you're not going to be able to capture them. And it's, I think most meta nowadays for tournaments is going away from just, you're not going to have, you may have one kill point mission, but most of the other missions aren't going to be kill points, and which means, yeah, you might win one game, but if you can't win the other ones, you're not going to win a tournament if you're trying to win a tournament. So I think you have to go with stuff that's going to grab objectives, since I think you have to worry about that. As far as elite choices, it depends on what you're running. If you're going to run a wall, honestly, Thrope's the way to go, which is in the new Imperial Armour Amphibian Project book. Definitely pick it up. It has the Machiron in it too. There's a lot of good things in there. There's some Stone Crusher Carnifexes, although for their points, I don't think they are that great if you're playing competitively. As far as other elites go, you can run the Zoanthrope and drop them down in a pod to kill things. It's certainly a viable option. It's a little expensive. The other thing you can do is you can do a Hive Guard. I wouldn't do the Haywire. I would honestly just do the Strength 8 2-shot, ignores cover. Unfortunately, their Ballistic Scale went down 1, and they got 5 more points more expensive. I don't quite understand that. Although a lot of people are running individual, and I don't think they're bad, Lictor Broods. Now, Lictors are pretty awesome because they deep strike and they don't miss up, so you just put them wherever you want to. And if you put them down in cover, they have move through cover. So when they land, if they deep strike in cover, they don't take a dangerous terrain check, which is awesome. Then they've got stealth, so they land in terrain, and they're in, let's say, a 5-up. They've got a 4-up cover, or 3-up if they're in ruins. They have flesh hooks, which are their base strength, which their base strength is 6. So they're strength 6, and they get how many attacks they have. So they have 3 attacks. So they get 3 shots, strength 6, which is nothing to sneeze at. And they've got because of the flesh hooks, they act as assault grenades, so they can go through cover and still attack an initiative. They're high initiative 6. They're only toughness 4, but they have 3 wounds. So they're very good elites, and they're very good at infiltrating things, and they're very good at getting and disrupting. And actually, I took them to last Adepticon to the friendly tournament more of as a joke because I really didn't think much of them. I didn't think they were that good. And I took 2 groups of 2, and I was really impressed with them. They actually did a lot of work for me, and I had a new respect for them after that, and I actually played them in a few regular tournaments afterwards because I thought they were pretty good. So Lictors aren't bad either. And if you're going to go more of a flying route and not having your kind of wall coming towards the enemy, then Lictors aren't a bad way to spend your points because you don't really need the protection like the Thropes are going to give with the with the cover. If you're going to run a Zoanthrope's Brood squad, then you obviously won't be able to take as many Lictors, but it's something you could do. You could potentially also run the Hive Guard in a pod as well, But as far as competitive-wise build, if you're going min-max, meaning the minimum, spending the minimum points and putting as much into heavy stuff as possible, you're probably going to go with lictors in this group and not anything else, because everything else is expensive. Although, like I said, zoanthropes and hive guard are certainly possible because they both could land and shoot something if you're going to put them in a pod. But I think you almost have to put them in a pod. If you're going to run a line, I don't think Venom Thropes are the way to go. I think Malanthropes are the better way to go, honestly, in my opinion. Now, fast attack, it depends on what you're going to run. Competitively, I think the Harpy is the way to go because you can put the Strength 9. That's 5 points to give them a Venom Cannon. They're base 135 points. So I think they're very good in this edition. The Hive Crone is possible, and they've got the Haywire shots, but they've only got 4 of them. So there's something you can run, I think, although I think the Harpies are better in this edition. So for fast attack, that's probably where I would go for competitive, for vehicle shooting and stuff like that. Now heavy is where we've got the goods. Honestly, I think ultra competitive you're going to run Molix and take as many of those as you can and just pop up and hit stuff. If you're going to run pods, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and if you're like me and your Molix aren't as accurate, I still use them, but I really like the terrain effects a lot. He's got the acid spray, which is a torrent weapon, and he can take upgrades, so I would give him electroshock grubs if he can. And he's got 2-up save, so he's very, very survivable. He's going to really come down and really, challenge the people. They're going to have to deal with him. And here's the thing, whatever you put on the board is going to get shot at, but what you're hoping to do, honestly, is you want your troops to stay alive to take objectives, and you want your Flyrants to stay alive to keep shooting stuff, because they, by far, do the most damage to your opponent. And so you want scary stuff that your opponent's going to want to deal with because they're scared of what's on the ground. Tyrannifex is certainly one that they're gonna like, I got to deal with this guy. He's got a 2-up save. He's gonna wreak some havoc if he comes down on my back line and attacks them and assaults somebody. The other thing is the Demacharon, so I think both of those are really good. Something that is going to attract the attention of your opponent. Now, don't be disheartened when it gets killed, because it's going to. And that's almost its job, because you want your Flyrants alive and you want them to die in their place. Last Adepticon, one of my partners said to me, and we were playing, and you probably don't want to hear this, but Eldar, Harlequins were my first army, and we had, each of us took a Wraith Knight for a team tournament, and he said, if that Wraith Knight's not dead at the end of the game, you did something wrong. And when I thought about it and I talked to him about it, I realized he's right, because that thing should be such a fire magnet, taking all the fire from everything else, that it should die at some point in the game. I'm not saying you throw it away recklessly. I'm saying if it's doing its job, it's probably going to die. And I think the same thing's true for the Tyrannifex or the Molix, is they're supposed to come up and kill something probably, but even if they don't get their points back, if they ended up dying and they took up the opponent's whole army of shooting, or most of the army shooting, then they weren't shooting at your flyer, which next turn can go and shoot something else. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it dying. Don't be disheartened if that happens. It is hard to fight a super shooty army, but I think that the Tyranids actually have the ability to do it now, especially with some of the new formations and especially with the new troop model. Sorry, and another thing troop-wise I forgot to mention, and I was trying to do it in a nice, concise order, and I failed at it. I still think Gene Stealers are a possibility for troops because they don't rely on Synapse, which hurts Tyranids so much. And you still could stick a Broodlord in there to have... He's expensive, but he could be your Warlord to try to stay alive. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything wrong with using Gene Stealers to, one, infiltrate, and move through cover and just go to ground and try to take objectives, especially for Maelstrom and objective games, which you're going to have. And you have to plan for that. You can't just build your list on just DACA shooting. You have to have troops that can actually take stuff. So I don't think Gene Stealers are a bad way to go, honestly. I mean, I wish they had assault grenades. I wish they had a better armor. Every Tyranid player does, and they're expensive, but they still can do so much because they don't rely on synapse at all. Certainly it helps them, and if you have a Broodlord in there, he can cast Dominion. Here's something to think about. Is sometimes I don't like my Gene Stealers to be in synapse because then they're fearless and they can't go to ground. I like them to be able to go to the ground, but let's say, for instance, if you have a Broodlord or if you have some, here's a tactic. They went to ground, so they're going to act. They can snap shoot, which they have no guns, but they can't assault or anything like that turn. But here's a trick. Let's say I want to use my Gene Stealers that turn. Well, if I have a Broodlord, I cast Dominion, they become fearless, and instantly, with fearless, you get to act normally as soon as you become fearless. So yes, in the psychic, it's not until the psychic phase, so you don't get to move normally, but you can assault normally. Another trick is that you can move, position your Flyrants to get within 12 inches of your Gene Stealers, and then in the movement phase, if you move him first, they suddenly become fearless, and in the 7th edition rulebook, if they become fearless at any point, they act normally. So you can kind of do a cheap trick, and next turn make them fearless, and they can act normally again, which kind of defies the rules, but that's the way fearless works. So it's a really cool trick that you can use with the Gene Stealers, which I think is really nice. So I think Gene Stealers are viable. I know some people would say you're crazy, but I've used them to effect, and I love my Tyranids. So I'm going to cut this video off because it's probably been too long, but hopefully this helps. I'm going to do a bigger Tactica series in the near future that will cover everything, but I just wanted to get a video out because you'd requested it, and I love to get questions, and I want to try to answer them as soon as I can. So Goretog, this is to you. This video is for you, bud. Hopefully you found this helpful, and take care and keep wargaming. And if you got more questions, I would love to hear them. Anybody have more questions, you can always leave a message on the page below, or you can go to my Facebook page, Wargamer Sean, on Facebook, or you can email me at wargamersean@yahoo.com. Anyway, have a good day and keep on wargaming.
Goodbye. 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 Bye-bye. Goodbye. See ya. Bye for now. Bye for now. Goodbye. I like bottoms.